Good evening, everybody. Welcome. So good to see you all here. What a big crowd we have tonight. I'm Jennifer LaRue. I'm the Director of Public Programs at the Mark Twain House and Museum in Hartford, Connecticut. And first, I want to thank you all for your patience and understanding when we postponed this program from last week to tonight. I'm glad we were able to reschedule so quickly, thanks to Melia and Sherry's flexibility. And I'm grateful to all of you for, again, your patience in accommodating that change. I'm not going to talk for very long, but I just want to first of all welcome you again and to point out a few features of Crowdcast, which might be a new program to some of you. I see many of you are already chatting away in the chat. That's awesome. Please keep doing that throughout the program. We have found that people attending our virtual programs, which we've been doing since last April 13, 2020 was the first one we did, and that was also with Melia, Bensussen. But we found that people have been making friends and continuing to chat with one another even after the program, because this is being recorded and will be up on our website, but the chat remains active and live, so you can come back to it anytime you like. However, we are going to have a Q&A session at the end of our conversation this evening, and if you have a question to ask Sherry or Melia, please put that in that Ask a Question area that you see at the bottom of your screen. That makes it a lot easier for us to manage that. And you can also take a look there at the questions other people have posed, and you can upvote questions if you want the same question answered. Also at the bottom of your screen, right under my face, you see a long green bar that says your donation here will be shared equally by Hartford Stage and the Mark Twain House and Museum. That is an opportunity, if you're willing and able, to make a donation to support these two very important cultural organizations. I know I can speak for both the Twain House and the Hartford Stage in saying that this has been a really rough past year. We've both been without our major revenue streams, and while things are starting to look brighter, it's been really challenging to stay afloat during the past year, and we've done so largely through the generosity of people like yourselves who share whatever you're able, be it $5, $50, or whatever. If you can click on that button, we will split that two ways between the two organizations, and just know that on behalf of the staffs and the boards of both organizations, we treasure every penny that you're able to share with us and put them to very, very good use. So thank you in advance for that. Another thing that I want to point out in the chat, and we'll repost this, it's kind of migrated toward the top because y'all have been chatting away. We do have copies of Sherry Turkle's excellent book, The Empathy Diaries, that we're going to be talking about tonight, available for purchase through our museum store. We know you can go other places and buy this book, but if you do make your purchase through us by using that link in the chat, not only do you get a signed copy, but also you know that you're supporting the Mark Twain House through your purchase. So thank you in advance for that. And those books will be shipped out in the next few days after the program. And I just want to point out also, we'll put information about this in the chat as well, but this is a first of a two-part series of conversations with Sherry Turkle, and the next one will be happening on May 6th in conversation with Rabbi Donna Berman at the Charter Oak Cultural Center. And Rabbi Berman also happens to be Sherry Turkle's cousin, so that's going to be fun, and you'll want to register for that one as well. So having said all that, I know you are all eager to hear our speakers. Sherry Turkle is professor of the social studies of science and technology at MIT and the founding director of the MIT Initiative on Technology and Self. A licensed clinical psychologist, she's the author of 6 books, including Alone Together and the New York Times bestseller Reclaiming Conversation. Melia Bensussen is a dear friend of the Mark Twain House and Museum. She's done a lot of these programs with us. She's the artistic director of Hartford Stage, our beloved sister organization here in town. So please join me, everyone, in welcoming Sherry Turkle and Melia Bensussen.
We're here.
Welcome. Hi, you are here.
Thank you.
And thank you for being here. I look forward to hearing your conversation. And Melia, just let me know when you want me to come back up and help with the questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Jennifer. And thank you for hosting us. Thank you to the Mark Twain House. Hi.
Hello. I should say to everybody that Melia is a dear friend. So this is going to be heartfelt.
Well, that's true. I was gonna say I'm really honored that I get to do this with you. And what fun, right? That we get to share this. Um I loved your book. You know this. We've talked about it. I was saying earlier I was really honored. I got to read, as you said, some of the sexy parts before publication. But it's an extraordinary work. I think I'll just jump in to questions because you and I can go on and on
Yeah,
about any number of topics. So I'll start, and you can always answer the question you wish you'd been asked instead of the question I'd asked,
sure.
right?
Right.
Okay. Um, so I love this book. This book's a bit of a departure for you, right? I mean, how did it feel to write a memoir instead of an analytical work? What was that experience like for you?
It was actually um, it felt like a calling. I was called to write this book because I'd always wanted to read a book like this, where somebody who really had a passion for their work. And my job obviously isn't
Right.
just a job, it's really a calling. Sort of said why, went to the try, really tried to tell that story. And there are a few books that for me were models. I think Oliver Sacks, by the time he gets to his later work and he's sort of telling the truth of his life, that his work is so deeply grounded in his own conflicts and his own
Yeah.
story and his own. But he didn't set out to do that. It's almost like he does it by accident. It sort of slips out in some ways. And I just I knew that my story about a lack of empathy in my own upbringing and of needing to figure out what was going on in people's heads, like some sort of Nancy Drew detective of my life, because I was asked as a child to lie about so many things. I mean, for those who haven't seen the book, read the book, I was asked to lie about my name, not lie about my father's identity, and so forth. Um, that uh, putting myself in the place of other people and trying to figure out why they were doing this really marked me so deeply, and had so much to do with my later story. And I just wanted to tell that story.
I love how you've answered that because it sort of leads into something you and I have talked about before, which is that it's really easy to see a memoir or a bio of any kind as a sort of march towards victory.
Right,
A driven and focused, and she always knew what she wanted, and that
right.
Sherry, she was always so smart.
Yeah,
And you have always been so smart. But part of what I love
right.
about the book is that you're kind of showing how the pain and challenges that you experienced through your life have supported your passion for your work and created your relationship with your work.
Yes. I mean, I stumbled into what I do. I never saw a computer. I mean, I'm sort of the people have said I'm a cyber diva, or the Margaret Mead of digital culture. I mean, I had never seen a computer until I went to MIT to just spend a year there to write about French psychoanalysis. I
Right.
was there to finish my dissertation on French psychoanalysis and turn it into a book. That's why I was at MIT. They gave me this incredible fellowship to do that. And then I just met people who were talking about computers and their minds and thinking about their mind as a computer's mind and seeing their mind differently. And I just said, this is the most fascinating. I've never heard of anything like this. And it sort of reminded me about the way people use psychoanalytic ideas in the very beginning to
Right.
think about their minds. And I said, wow, a new generation is going to grow up using computational ideas to think about their minds. I want to study this. I want to study this now. I want to take these children who were learning to program and try to figure out how they're thinking. But when I got to MIT, all I was thinking about was Jacques Lacan and French
Right.
psychoanalysis and how I could finish my book.
Right.
So I just think it's so important that people who are starting out understand that
The
that there's
sloppiness of it.
yes, that what's important is that you understand your gifts. I mean, this is what I tell my students. It's important that you understand something, which is understanding your gifts. And I knew what my gift was, that I really could talk to people and find a way to ask them about how they thought about their inner process. And I'd worked on that. And but I never thought I'd be doing it by asking them how programming computers reminded them of their mind. I mean, that was like
Well, I
never
guess, I mean,
crossed my mind.
you're in a sense answering a question I've had since, since reading the book and through our conversations, is how your education in psychoanalysis and your experience both as an analyst and an analysand has informed your understanding of computational biology. I don't think those are two things that, with the exception of your work, normally go together. How do they inform each other in your mind? I mean, you're talking about communication and exploring how our minds work.
Well, the fact of having had, and I don't think it has to be psychoanalysis, but the fact of having had a personal experience of talk therapy, which wasn't just cognitive, which wasn't just, you have a problem, let's lay out the problem, let's see if we can, power through to a solution. But the kind of therapy that I had, which is psychoanalytically oriented, and the kind of therapy I learned how to do, which was you form a relationship with your therapist, and you then analyze how the things that you're doing in your outside life usually are mirrored in the sorts of things that come up in your relationship with your therapist. It's called the transference. So if you find yourself being angry at people deserting you, and then all of a sudden you feel like your analyst is deserting you, like why is she always late? Why is she forgetting our appointment? You talk about that dynamic in the therapy, and then it turns out you're understanding something that's happening in the rest of your life. So that method of seeing a conversation as a microcosm for understanding the rest of your experience is something that is kind of a fundamental, both philosophical methodology that helped me live a richer life, understand myself better, but I also brought it to my work because it's, to just quickly answer the question, which all of that is prefaced, it's a methodology that's based on meaning, whereas a computational way of thinking about the mind is really based on mechanism. And so when I was studying people and computers and thinking about the mind as a computational machine versus thinking about the mind in this more psychoanalytic way, I've really been studying for 30 years the shift from meaning to mechanism in how people approach the world. And I think if you look at the culture today, you see some of the costs of that we don't, in my view, enough think about the meaning of our human interactions, but are too quick to sort of do a cognitive analysis of them or to treat them, not really look at their underlying dynamics. And I think this is something that has to do with keeping theater alive.
I was just going to say, right?
I think that is so much part of, I think, the intellectual content of our friendship, is that I feel that you get that message across in the work you do as a director.
Yeah, I love you for saying that. But I was just writing meaning to mechanism, because I was just thinking how the craft of making a play, of communicating to an audience, is exactly what you're talking about. And I've always seen the connection between theater and psychoanalysis. But now you're helping me see that computers are maybe part of this conversation in some interesting way.
Very much, because it was interesting. Today I was interviewed by Alan Alda. He has a podcast, and he was interviewing me for his podcast.
All right, I've just been trumped. I mean, so to speak.
And
I mean, you've gone from Alan Alda to me in one day.
He asked about you. No, but the reason I bring it up, the reason I bring it up is I was talking to an actor. I mean, the point was I was talking to an actor.
Yeah.
And he asked me, well, how the people at MIT like this or not like this? And they said they didn't like it, but it wasn't because they didn't like me, but it was because they wanted to apply the engineering principle of things being friction-free to people.
That's great.
And I was and in the Empathy Diaries, I write a lot about this.
Right.
About all these engineers thinking that human relations should be friction-free. And he was saying, my God, as an actor, I'm always looking for the friction.
That's where the drama lives. Theater is about conflict fundamentally, right? If there's not a conflict with two people on stage, it's a snooze fest. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. So I really didn't mean to drop it.
No, I'm teasing. I'm teasing you.
What I meant to say is that when an actor looks at this material, and I ask the question in the Empathy Diaries, who is it that wants human life to be friction-free? And I answer, technology does. Technology does, because then you can program it, you can model it, you can simulate it more easily. But that is the cautionary tale that I tell in my work. It's not about how many hours people are in front of screens or measuring your screen time, or that's not the essential. The essential is whether we think that there's something about our relationships and about what we treasure about being a person that involves passion and friction and messiness and sloppiness and things that can't be captured in program.
Yeah.
And I think that's what theater is about. That's what human beings are about.
Yeah. You said a wonderful thing to me at one point when you were thinking about the book or writing, when you were in the midst of working on the book, which, can I just say, not a lot of us accomplished this during the pandemic. I mean, it's a little hard to like you sometimes. Like, hi, how was your pandemic? Well, I wrote my memoir. But you told me that one of the things you were doing when writing, which I loved and which I'm holding on to as a thought for maybe a future collaboration for us, is that you thought about this a bit as a play and you thought about scenes. Can you talk about how you approached it, so informed by theater, for our wonderful Hartford stage subscribers and friends of the theater?
Yes. Well, I'm a theater, I was going to say nut, but that sort of puts it down. There's no reason to put it down. I'm a great lover of theater. And one of the great characters in the book is my Aunt Mildred, who the Empathy Diaries are a sort of homage to my Aunt Mildred, who in a cast of characters who taught me empathy by not showing much of it, she who made me try to figure out, well, I wonder what this empathy thing is. I could do some. She really, I think she saved I was going to say she saved my life, but what I mean by that is not that she saved my life physically. She saved my inner light. She saved my inner light because she recognized me.
She saw you. I mean, she truly saw you.
Yes. And that, I think, is when I talk about empathy, I'm really talking about seeing someone, committing to someone. I like to say putting yourself not just in their place, but in their problem. It's a commitment to being there with someone. And as I wrote the book, I knew that there were characters that needed to be revealed, but I couldn't tell them. I had to show them. And I really began
and that is a basic tenet of playwriting right there.
Yes.
Right? Don't tell, show.
Right. So to say I had a great Aunt Mildred and she lit my life. Now I'm here. I'm sure my voice cracked. I'm sure I look like I'm thinking of her, but I've told you nothing. But I tell stories of us in Paris with so little money and my wanting a piece of luggage called a Speedy. I've never had anything. I hardly, I was working as a cleaning lady. I was, clean. I
Yep.
really was, it was a time when I was working as a cleaning lady, and the people I was working for called me leur Portuguese, they're Portuguese, because it was kind of a generic for cleaning lady. So it was not a situation where I had a lot of money. And it was my 21st birthday, and my mother had died, and had to leave college because I had no money, and my stepfather had kind of taken away my scholarship, and bad times. And she said, "What can I get you?" She had gotten her ticket. She was staying in a hotel. And I said, "I want this beautiful piece of luggage so that when I'm a grown-up author, I will get on a plane." And I saw myself with my manuscript in this. Does everybody know what I don't have my Speedy here, but it's a beautifully shaped. Everybody should Google Speedy,
Not right now, not while
right
they're
now, not
listening
right
to
now.
you, but
Right,
yeah,
but soon.
you're gonna make me cry. But yeah,
Right. Anyways, and we put it was on the Rue de Rennes, and we put our faces against the glass, and we looked at this Speedy, and she says, "I'm moving out of my hotel. I'm getting into bed with you. We'll just eat street food like croque monsieur, and I think we can just pay for the Speedy." I mean, so that was a scene, more than,
yeah.
what can I say? I mean, I just said, okay, so that's Aunt Mildred. What, what she did for me there. And it was funny, and it was fun, and I have the Speedy still. I mean,
It lasted. How
it
did you
lasted. So I
have the
chose
vision?
for each person the scene that
Right.
showed, and that's really how I began the book.
Well, and you talked about how you realized which characters maybe weren't essential to each scene, which was really an interesting approach to a memoir, right? I mean, you're thinking very dramatically of how many people you can populate in any particular, right? How can you populate a scene? That's what I meant to say.
Right. And I simplified, and I pared down, and I pared down, and I pared down. I mean,
Did you combine people?
My mother, no, never. No.
Okay. So it is a memoir. It's yeah. All right. Just checking.
I'm an ethnographer. I'm an ethnographer. I'm trained. I'm trained as an ethnographer.
You studied with Victor Turner, okay?
I did.
We've never talked about Victor Turner, but oh my God, those books were like Bibles in theater programs. Do you know that?
Right.
We all read Victor Turner, and anyway, I won't digress.
Well, I think, but no, I don't actually. I think talking about Victor Turner is very important, because Victor Turner, for anybody who hasn't read him, wrote about liminality, moments betwixt and between, and I feel very strongly that the pandemic has put us in a liminal moment. I mean, Melia knows that I feel this way, a kind of betwixt and between moment that, of course, it's terrible, and I'm not being Pollyanna, but it gives us new possibilities, because the old rules don't seem to apply and the new ones haven't been written. And my optimism comes from feeling that so strongly.
I have to make this connection for those of you who might have been with us last week when we talked to Emma Smith about her Shakespeare book, because we talked about liminality in Shakespeare, Sherry, right?
Right.
So we talked about this idea of liminality and how important it is at this time.
Right. No, I feel very strongly about that. And my book uses, ideas from my academic life, and I use them to think about my personal life. One of the ones that really helped me so much is this notion. The French word is dépaysement, but it's decountrifying. When you take yourself out of a situation and you see it with fresh eyes. So I went to Paris when I dropped out of college and I worked as a cleaning lady. I lived kind of in this different world. But when I came back to the United States, it
was a different place. Yeah.
It was a different place. And I was a different person, and I saw the country new. And I think that habit of always being ready to step out and be other and be marginal is one of the messages of the book, that it's a good thing. It's a great skill to have. And again, talking about my lack of empathy growing up. I think it's something that it wasn't good that I felt marginal, but I sort of turned it into a...
Well, so that's the question, right? Because when we talked about what to title this talk, you're the one who came up with our title, right? Of how we find meaning in our life's work. And you link it, I think, very much to this marginality and these series of losses and challenges you had younger. How do some people have the skill set then to find a passion and to turn these challenges as you have? And I just, my brain just went, suddenly I want to talk to you about some of the cruelty that you're able to articulate in the book. So I want to come back to that.
Right.
But how you turn, what is it? What's that skill that allows this young woman who's a cleaning lady in Paris, has dropped out of college, her mother has died, her stepfather's disappeared, she doesn't know her father, but she envisions having a high-end suitcase with a manuscript in it. I mean, that's really cool.
Well, I know.
It's
know
not
the
easily identifiable,
right.
but like
I know what you're asking, and I think I have an answer, but I'm not sure it links directly to the Speedy.
But that's fine. Ignore the Speedy.
No. But I think that people. I think I was saved. There's a lot of cruelty. There are some scenes that border on abuse. There's a lot of lack of empathy. I mean, my mother said, "We're not going to call you by your name. We're going to call you by a different name." With no sense that might be like a problem. I mean, she was
But do you think, she was trying, she did have, yes, this is where I'm going. You go, because that's where I'm going. Exactly.
Yes. But it turned out that these things which were terrible challenges for me, were done by people who were deeply connected and really devoted to me, who were deeply flawed, who made, I think, what do they call it, bad choices.
But you were loved. You were deeply
but I was
loved.
Deeply loved. So I think that really what the book is about and here's what the connection to psychoanalysis is, and where I think that you never get there if you just use a computational model. If I was teaching a class, I would probably say, this is the part that you should write down. As the teacher.
I'm writing it down. I'm writing it down.
Right. This is the part, is that attachment, if you have attachment, human attachment, you can transcend. And so this book, but computational models will never get you.
Will never get you attachment. So that kind of connects to all your work about like the robots and senior citizens' homes and right, because
exactly
right, because that's what you and I met on, was that work.
Right. The thing I love most to hate is give me an old person and tell me you're going to make a robot their best friend, and I'm like, I go ballistic. Because what people need, what that person deserves, is a human attachment. And actually, I had this experience in the beginning of the pandemic. A New York Times reporter called me, and he says, "We want you to talk to a therapy robot,
right? Because
we want you to comment on this." I said, "Absolutely. I'm not going to like it, but I'm going to go." So I talked to this therapy robot, and I said,
I didn't know this story. I just love this. Yeah.
So I say, "Look, it's the pandemic. Do you know how to talk about loneliness? Because that's my problem. You're
alone in a house. You're without people.
I'm alone. That's my problem. I'm on Zoom. I'm teaching. It's like I'm people from like 8 o'clock in the morning till not. But I'm, and the chatbot. It's a chatbot. It says absolutely like loneliness is like the spécialité de la maison. It's like the thing I do best. So I said, good, because that is my problem. And then there was a programming glitch, and this really sophisticated AI says loneliness is warm and fuzzy. It was a glitch because this thing is really smart. I took a screenshot. I sent it to the New York Times reporter.
So that's appearing on the screen as writing.
Yeah. Right, it's writing, right? Because
Okay.
we're in this dialogue about my loneliness.
And it's
problem.
typed dialogue. It's not spoken. Okay.
Yes, and it's you can give it a voice, but I wanted it typed. It says,
Okay.
So I said, thank you very much. The session is over. And I said to the New York Times reporter, well, this is why this is of no use. This is why it's out of its area of competence. Why should a robot know about love and loss? And I'm afraid of getting this disease, and I'm afraid of intubation, and I'm afraid. I mean, I'm afraid of not seeing my daughter again, or seeing her on a screen, or she's going to get sick. Or
Right.
I was filled with anxiety. I really was not a very good. I had a terrible anxiety in the beginning of the pandemic. And why would a robot without a body or without attachment care about such things? So it's essentially, I was saved, no matter how much,
Cirrus.
by deep attachment.
Yeah.
And that, Aunt Mildred buying me my Speedy, I mean, that was a woman who
saw
believed
you
in me and deeply loved me. And, you have that when people like that leave you, you mourn them, but you bring them inside you and they light your life.
You do it's so extraordinary to track your journey through the book, because you've got the parallel personal and intellectual life, right? You've got, stories of relationships and stories of the why you've made choices, sitting alongside sort of the intellectual awakenings you're having in different points of your career. And I wonder how I guess here's the question, is the experience of writing the memoir, how much has it changed how you view your own life? I mean, like this narrative that you have now for us that is so generous and affirming. It's fundamentally a really affirming narrative. Did you have that before you wrote the book, or is the writing of the book part of the creating of the narrative? You know what I'm saying, right?
For me, the writing of the book was, and I here, if any of my psychoanalysts are listening to this, I really want to apologize, or many therapists. Honestly, I've done a lot of personal work. There's something very different about what I learned by putting things on a timeline and seeing what all the actors were doing at a given moment in the play that I never got out of my analysis. I'll give you an example. There's a moment when my mother gives me a gift of a white hat, a tam with a little puffy little ball on top. And she says, Sherry, I knitted this for you. And I knew she didn't knit it. She didn't knit. My mother didn't make anything. She was not a knitter. She was not a cook. She was a loving mother, but that's not how she expressed herself. And I was so angry and felt so betrayed. Another lie. And when I put the story together for the memoir and tracked out where she had been all at that point, when I had a kind of timeline for all of my characters, that was when she found out she had breast cancer and knew she was going to keep it a secret from everyone, including me, because she wanted me to go away to college and not stay home with her, which I would have done if I'd known that my mother was dying. And she came home from the doctor. I was staying with my grandmother. And on her way home from the doctor, she stopped at Lamston's and she just picked up this hat to give me something.
Yeah.
So this gesture, which I had experienced as kind of an aggression, just lying one more time, but you knit it, instead of saying you bought it. I understood now that I could empathize really with where she had just been and what it was just her wanting to express I love you. I'm here for you. I can't, and you were going to be taken from me.
It's amazing that you did that, and it was in the writing. You had
Yes.
you have a gift in this book, which, I'm going to say something slightly odd, given that it's a memoir,
Yeah.
but a brilliant playwright, Maria Irene Fornes, once said that you can tell autobiographical fiction because the central character is passive.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because we feel we're acted upon. We don't see ourselves acting. And yet in this memoir, you are able to detach and see how people behave towards you, and also how you behaved, your moments of cruelty. You're able to really have an objective eye, which I think is part of why you can get to this place. And I don't know if that's the computational work, the intellectual work, the psychoanalytic work, combination of all of all of those.
Well, I think that's why I was ready when the true answer to why I wrote this memoir is I was ready to write the memoir.
Yeah.
And I didn't, this memoir is not, I'm going to get back at MIT. I'm going to get back at my mom. My grandmother was really good. My grandfather was a tyrant. I mean, I was beyond that.
Yeah.
And I did see, even my biological father, who, spoiler alert, I find him with detectives, and he's a very problematic character, but actually I owe him, because I think he gave me a lot of my intellectual, I recognized something in him that was also me. He was a seeker. He was a crazy seeker, but he was a seeker. And I saw that. And I had to say, because my dad was a seeker, and I had to recognize I'm a little crazy seeker, So I was ready to tell the story of these people, because I really came to, I had matured to a point where I could see that. But, I couldn't see that. I would have to say that the process of memoir writing put me into a discipline that was different from the free associating, from the inquiries about my mother that I'd been able to do previously. But also, I think that now I'm in a different place. I was ready to discover these things. I was ready to
Thank you. And I could ask you to tell all these stories of how you met your biological father and all, but I'm going to keep things for people, to read in the book. I want to ask you a selfish question. Okay.
Sure.
As a theater director, as the artistic director of Hartford Stage, as somebody who is constantly encouraging people to seek out the theater, part of the argument I've always made is that the arts, the theater, great fiction, are kind of an empathy muscle, right? The gym for your empathy muscles.
It is.
And recently I read, and I'm sure you saw this too in the New York Review of Books, a piece called The Banality of Empathy. And one of the things, she argues, is that when we go to the arts, when we read a book or see a play, and it particularly mentions theater, we empathize, but we don't act. We feel it's resolved, right? We have identification, whatever we could talk about what Aristotle calls it, and we have our own catharsis, and then we leave. And she's kind of arguing that it's not enough. And I've always talked about theater as a way of growing our empathy. And so how do we deal with this question of what is empathy and how it develops? And I want you to say whether theater matters. That's the selfish part of the
theater
question.
matters. Well, there's a big argument. Empathy is out.
This is what's so interesting.
Right. There are books called Against Empathy. I hate empathy. Empathy is yesterday. Empathy is, if you're writing a book on empathy.
The banality of empathy. What a great headline, right?
Empathy. There's literally a book called Against Empathy, or Empathy No, or, kind of empathy not. No, but it's, and really, there is a serious intellectual conversation, but essentially, and part of it the part of it that I'm engaged in has to do with people who argue that virtual reality is what you need, where you actually put yourself you want to know what it feels like to be in a camp in Sarajevo. Put on goggles, and I'll make you a theatrical experience where you'll feel like you're in a Sarajevo. You're in a camp or in a war zone, or literally not asking people to have a conversation or to do what I'm trying to do with you now, which is like but just like put people like in this space. So this conversation about empathy and waste of time empathy is very hot. My feeling is that it's completely a false issue, because empathy is a first step. And then what do you do?
Mm-hmm.
The theater, novels, conversation, group experiences, travel. These are your building blocks. My time in France, putting myself into the heads of these people who had just tried to make a revolution and had failed.
Right. The timing of when you were there was amazing.
Exactly. These are the building blocks. And then the question is, or now in this country, what are we going to do with the people who believe in a conspiracy theory, or who think all kinds of hateful, racist, anti-Semitic? We need to understand, and theater and literature is going to help us. And then the question is, how do we then commit, and how do we act, and how do we engage? Nobody ever said that you walk out of the theater and you're done. That wasn't the idea, is that you do the theater and then you're no, then you're
Yeah.
I feel the theater for me has been the beginning of political engagement, has been the beginning of kind of self-discovery. It's not like, I'm finished. I saw I saw a movie or a theatrical performance, but you need to work these muscles, because
that's the idea, right?
Because if you're meaning or mechanism, it's meaning. You have to work your meaning. You have to cultivate your meaning radars. And I believe that the theater is a big part of that, and that literature, and that the kinds of studies that I do, teaching someone to be an ethnographer, teaching someone to be a field worker, teaching someone to be a therapist. These are how you cultivate these skills. But it's not the end.
That's wonderful.
It's the beginning. So I think people are picking a fight. And I just, whenever I'm on the stage with these people who are picking this fight with me, I say, kind of like,
yeah, it's smart. It's very smart. It's a much more sophisticated answer. I love that answer.
I don't think you need to fight with anybody about the role of theater or the importance of theater.
There we go. You heard it from Sherry Turkle. Brilliant woman right there. Jennifer, I should invite you back, because I really could talk to Sherry forever. So just to give other people an opportunity to ask questions, I'll turn to you.
Well, we could listen forever.
Great fun. This is just great fun.
And I can tell from audience comments that people are really, really enjoying this. So thank you both very much. And it's lovely to see the chemistry between the two of you too. So that's an added element.
Well, we just met.
You just met.
10 minutes ago in the room. Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
The French call that the coup de foudre, the sort of, falling in love.
No, well, it's whatever it is, and I know that that's not the case, obviously, but it's really lovely. It's made for a wonderful evening. We don't have too many questions. I think this happens sometimes during these really riveting programs where people are hanging on your every word and they forget to put questions out. So we do have one to get us started. And audience, please chime in with more questions. I know that you have them. Mary Lou, who's one of our regulars, says, you seem to have discovered the meaning of various actors in your life and have reached some new conclusions. Do you feel that those conclusions will expand or change? That's a good question.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
And I would even link that to a question I keep meaning to ask you, is how writing the memoir and seeing these people in these lights impact your relationship as a mother to your daughter, and how her narrative grows with your own.
I think that it made me, I gave this book to my daughter to read. I felt very strongly that, that it was about my life. It stops before she's born. It says I have a daughter, and it has a scene of loving scene with her. Um, but I wanted to make sure that she, felt comfortable with the book. Um, she's learning a lot about her mother. um, and I was so moved. She said it was a gift.
Oh,
Both she and her husband felt that it was a gift. And I, I, I think I think that is because it was given to her with love, but I also think it is because I'm not, there is resolution in my relationship with
Yeah,
the
that's
people I'm
smart.
writing about. It's not like I'm on a voyage to discover whether my grandfather was a tyrant and whether that really screwed me up. He was a tyrant. It did screw me up. It did screw up my aunt. And I tell the story of how it limited us, but it gave us some humanity because he also was fiercely protective of us. And actually, there's a picture in the book that someone commented on of my grandfather holding me up as a child. He was a tyrant. He was a big man, but he adored me. And there's one picture of him where he's holding me up, like, Sherry, go into the world. That when I see this picture, I mean, the book is beautifully illustrated with family photographs
It
that I
is.
chose, and they're not art photographs. They're
snapshots.
they're
They're the real
snapshots,
thing.
but
Yeah.
they were the real thing. But they're chosen for a reason, and so that's what I mean. In other words, that's the portrait dramatically. I show scenes with him where he's a tyrant, but he's protecting me. Somebody makes me a chocolate malted, and the malted spills, and they take the malted and they put it back in the glass, and they're going to give me this malted that was on the counter. And he grabs this man in the soda fountain, and he practically, and the owner of the store is like getting us out of there. And that was the scene I chose from my grandfather. But when you read that, for me, and I say, well, is that going to change? Am I going to? That's a resolved relationship that I have with him. His anger over pettiness, he would kill that guy because of that malted. His anger over pettiness, but it all was geared towards protecting me. And that's what I grew up with. And so the answer is kind of no in that sense. And
That
that's
the
what I think
characters
Rebecca
won't
was,
change. Is
the
that what you? Yeah.
characters, yeah, that these are, I mean, I think of course that I'll change, but I mean, of course things will evolve. But I think that's what Rebecca was picking up, that somehow I have resolved these people in some way that really is 20 years in the making.
Yeah.
So
At least,
this
right?
book took a long time to write. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that strikes me about it is it's very mature in that it's not just a memoir in which you're sharing a lot of really negative experiences. I have to say a lot of these things are really bad things, but you're not just saying, oh, this bad thing happened and then this bad thing happened, or you come to the next step and say, okay, here's what I learned from that, here's what I gained from that, here's how that ultimately enriched my life. And I find that very inspiring.
Right.
Had
But
you
it's not,
shared?
yeah.
Go ahead,
No,
please.
Jennifer, no. Had I shared?
Had you shared these stories? Like I just the story just randomly out of the book, an incident on the subway where your pants were split by a
Right.
knife, and oh, what a horrible experience for you. Had you shared those stories with your daughter, for instance, before she read them in this book?
I think that was one of the news stories. In other words, I think what people, uh, I think what she learned uh, were that was a story that was new to her. I told her that there was disturbing material, But obviously, I didn't want to tell her the disturbing material before she read the book. In other words, I felt I owed her, because I think that people process, and she was also learning about my marriage and clearly my very passionate love for a man who's not her dad. And I think that that's like something you really never want to really,
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm just saying that, I'm not, I think that's more the kind of, there was a lot.
Right.
There was a lot. And I felt that it was more respectful of her to say, here is a book, take your time, and I'm here to talk to, but here is, and then she helped me edit it. She helped me with
Awesome.
she helped me with the final chapter, because she's in the final. She helped me tremendously with the final chapters of how to wrap it up. She helped me through the whole book, but she really, really came through. She's a brilliant editor, and she really, really came through on the final chapter.
That's pretty cool.
It is very cool. That's very cool.
So shout out to Rebecca Willard Sherman.
Shout out delivered.
Yes.
Dan would like to know, I wonder if one of the reasons empathy is becoming banal, I cringe to even type that, is because in addition to being disconnected, we're obsessed with instant gratification. It strikes me that theater and empathy both require great patience. What other tenets of empathy do you think are being challenged right now in our operational culture? Thanks for your question, Dan. And just a reminder, I see people posting questions in the chat. Please put them in the Ask a Question section.
What do you think, Sherry? Do you want to?
I think that's absolutely right. I want to not go into a rant, but what kind of culture is it where you think it's okay to have a conversation in which you're looking down at your phone? In my last book, Reclaiming Conversation, I talk about people talking to me about the rule of 3. And the rule of 3 is that if you're in a conversation like with 8 people or 6 people, it's okay to look down at your phone if 3 people have their eyes up. In other words, you preserve the continuity of the conversation, but you can look down at your phone. Now, that's basically what kind of empathy, what are you going to talk about in the question is, and it's like people are like saying, well, so there's really not a problem because the conversation continues. The social life of the group continues, even though I can look down at my phone. But I want to ask you, what am I going to share with you, Melia?
Right. Wait, hold that thought. I just have to look at my phone for a minute, and then I'll get back to you. I've been terrible. You've caught me out. You've caught me out when I'll share this. I was having lunch with Sherry. I was very anxious about one of my children. I think my daughter, was in middle school at the time, and we were having a tough time. And I'm having lunch with Sherry, and I hid the cell phone under my napkin. And I picked up the napkin. I can't believe now that I did this.
Who does she think she's dealing with?
And that's what you said. You were like, who are you having lunch with? Do you know who I am? And you're doing what?
No, but also, famous director fooling me by hiding her cell phone.
I was very subtle. I was very subtle.
All those years of psychoanalytic training.
Well, you also, I remember in one of your books, you talk about how just having the phone on the table lowers concentration in conversations. Just the physical presence of the phone anywhere on the table, that kind of blew me away.
Right. There's a great study where if you put your phone face down and turn it off.
Yep.
The empathic connection between you and the person you're having lunch with is much less. If you take the phone and you put it diminishes. If you put the phone in your peripheral vision, it diminishes your connection. So, these psychoanalysts and these therapists, I'm drawn to Melia's face. So I know that in order to have this look good, I should be looking at the camera. And I think Melia and I might have even discussed this. What does she do when she does her Zooming? And she says she looks at the camera. She knows what she's doing. She's a theater person. She tries.
Sometimes.
Right.
But
so I
the
know.
trick is
So
you've got to put the person's face right by the camera.
Right.
That's
So here I am looking at the camera, and I know that that's what looks good. But I don't want to do it. I want to look at her face. And I figure, look, if everybody will understand that it looks like I'm looking down, and they'll just say, well, she preferred to look, she preferred to look, well, no, it's what it says.
Right.
It doesn't actually look fine, but what it says is that I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to have this conversation without looking at your face.
Right. Right.
I mean, that's what I'm saying.
This is what's been so hard about Zoom, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and the silence. I mean, all of you people out there listening to us, and I love the chat, and yet it's not. We don't hear each other's breathing. We don't see each other.
Right.
It's really been a hard year.
But I think this thing about knowing that I'm not doing the job because I need to look at your face is really the thing that will stay with me about the pandemic.
That's interesting.
For the rest of my life. And I think I've said this. Maybe I've even put it on paper. I don't know. But I mean, so forgive me for being repetitive, but I mean, all year, I've taught. I've been. I on so many stages and so many. I've been on this book tour, and I know
all virtually.
Right? I haven't seen a person, and to know that I'm most effective when I'm not looking at the face of the person who's talking to me.
Oh, that's awful.
And
yeah.
Well, and it turns out that I kind of made a decision that, well, I'm just going to be less a performer, and I'm going to just take care of myself in a way.
Yeah.
That this has been a pleasure for me because I've been able to look at you.
Well, I look at you too, so there.
Yeah, so there you go. So for all of you who are disappointed that I'm not staring
You're doing great.
I just can't do it. I just, I can do it for like a little bit, and then I just.
No, it's strange. It's very strange.
It's just it's not right for me.
And I would say it's a hallmark of these crowdcasts that our speakers look at each other and not at the camera for the most part. And I think that's I think that audiences get it too. So, we have a couple more questions and I want to get to those. I just want to say that I've been invited to dinner parties before COVID where the convention is to everybody takes their cell phone and puts it in a bowl. And the bowl is whisked away and we don't have access to them at all. And I think that's a really good step in the right direction for that. Carol Wolf says, we need to spread these ideas to the world right now. How do we do that for our children, neighbors, and those who are not empathetic?
Sherry's books.
Right?
Oh, please. I feel as though I've made an effort here, people. Read the book.
Right? Exactly.
Also, someone did a shout out to your TED Talk in the chat, and
yes.
there's a lot of this kind of information about connection.
Yes, there is. My TED Talk, I would say my TED Talk is a primer in some of these ideas. I talk about a lot of these studies. I love that study about the cell phone on the table.
I love that.
And I talk about the old people in the nursing home. And
it's an excellent TED Talk.
Excellent. It's an excellent TED Talk. And I want to say that Melia and I came together because if you like the TED Talk, Melia was
her coach.
My coach.
It's her TED Talk coach. That's how we met.
Melia was my TED Talk coach. Yes,
that's awesome.
How we met. That's how we met. That I was so frightened and so stiff and like.
Can you imagine? She wasn't. She was just fine.
I was, but... and she looked at me and she said, "Who are you when you're giving this talk? I just don't recognize you. Just tell me this story. This is you were terrible. I was like terrible." And she had, I'm not saying she didn't have good material to work with, but she took me a long way. But she really was, honestly, I wish I had if I could find the tape of the original TED Talk. It was really bad.
That was great. I have to,
bad. It was
But go ahead, Jennifer. I just had to tease about the TED Talk.
No, I'm glad you did.
Right.
And we're all going to go back and watch it now.
Do buy the book and then write me. I mean, Turkle at mit.edu. I'd love to hear. I love reading people's reactions to the book.
Yeah.
It's like, it's such a pleasure for me. So, I mean, maybe other people say it but don't mean it, but I really mean it.
Well,
so
thank you for that.
I really, really, really mean it. I mean, you put in all these years writing this book and like it's just out there.
Right.
And then it
Silence.
gets reviewed. It's gotten beautiful reviews. I'm so gratified. But then, you know, I'm not in bookstores, so I don't see people. I don't give reading. You know, it's like I can't give a reading and see people. So I really miss that experience. And so I'd love to hear from you. I truly would.
Well, so people, the link is in the chat. Please do buy the book. Ellen had one more question that I think I'm going to say, buy the book and read it for the answer. She asked, how did the neighborhood you grew up in near the beaches at Abraham Lincoln High School affect your life? She's an alum, as were her parents. I think that probably is something you can learn a lot about in the book.
I'm at the beach right now. Is that whenever I'm anxious or afraid, I go to the beach.
Oh, wow.
The book begins at Rockaway, and when COVID hit, I went to the beach.
Wow.
So, I mean, I'm at the beach right now. The reason that these walls are made of, you know, kind of this kind of clapboard is I'm in a bungalow at the beach. So when I'm anxious, just put me at the water. So that's how it
awesome.
affects me.
Yeah, I'm with you.
I'd love to be there too. So, Sherry, before I close up, I just want tell us about your rating on Rate That Space. Your setting.
Well, actually, I can move this a little bit. If I move this a certain way, you can see. Hold on, let me show you how to do
Rate That Space. Sherry Turkle, she's accomplished everything, including a high rating on Rate That Space.
If I move this a certain way, I can get a orchid and it's, you know, and anyway, if I do a certain way, I can get a bookshelf and an orchid. And so this setting got a 10 over 10
just
in
goofy.
Rate This Space. So
that's just goofy.
Come for the book, stay for the room.
So
buy the book, stay for the orchid. There it is.
That's orchid. Great. I think that's the title of your next book.
Right. So Sherry, will you be in that same space next Thursday evening, May 6th, when we're talking with your cousin
Donna Berman?
Right.
So talk about small town. That's such a wonderful thing.
Yes, and the link for that is in the chat.
Donna Berman really knew Aunt Mildred. She was an inspiration to me and to Donna Berman.
Oh, I can't wait to hear the stories with the two of you.
Donna Berman is great, and Donna Berman is great. That's Aunt Mildred too.
That's
awesome.
She had a great mom and dad, but she also had a great Aunt Mildred.
Fantastic. And Melia, you'll be back next Thursday as well at noon.
That's right.
So links for both of these events are in the chat. Thank you, Jacques, for posting them. Melia's going to be talking with Pulitzer Prize winning playwright and In the Heights screenwriter Chiara Alegria Hudes.
Well, that's a little bit of upping me.
No. Very different. Very different.
So one Alan Alda to one Pulitzer. I think we're even. I think we're very even.
We're very even.
We're super even. I was feeling bad about my Alan Alda.
You don't have to feel bad about Alan Alda.
But all of a sudden, there's a Pulitzer Prize person.
Well, and let us just say she won the Pulitzer because Hartford Stage, prior to my arrival, commissioned the play that won the Pulitzer. So it's Hartford Stage at the center. That's really the key there.
Still.
Well, I'm going to let you juke this out.
Just dropping that. Donna Berman said, I love you, Sherry. Great interview.
We love you, Donna Berman.
We love you, Donna Berman.
Oh, what a delightful evening.
Thank you so much for inviting me, Melia. Thank you. This has been such a gift.
Thank you,
Jennifer, so much. I've had people, I don't see you, but I've just had the best time. It's really,
thank you for joining us.
Melia as a person, as a director, as an artist, and, you know, and as a soul. And this has just been a great honor for me.
This has really been fun.
This has really been the highlight of my tour. So I just thank you so much.
Well, the best is yet to come, because Donna Berman and you are going to be something. I can't wait to hear the cousins together.
So far.
All right. So far. All right. Thank you all so much for being here.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Good night. Thanks for a great
Jennifer,
conversation.
thank you. Thank you, Mark Twain House.